And so we're going to be practicing poses that will hold for about 3 to 4 minutes on each side of the body or in each pose. And I'll tell us more about that as we guide into it. And so the other important thing to remember is that this is your practice and your body and your time. And so if there's anything that I invite you to do that you are just absolutely opposed to or it doesn't feel right, just do something else. This is for you and yourself and your time. So we're going to get started doing something that I like to call volcano breaths. And the purpose of this is to just really let everything that we were dealing with before, that we might be dealing with after this time, just be elsewhere. And then we'll also kind of bring in things that we want to have more of. And so as you're on your seat, just go ahead and bring your hands to your heart center. And that's kind of at your breastbone, sternum bone, and just have them together. And think about something that is incredibly stressful or just something that you don't want to have to deal with for the next 90 minutes. And as you're breathing in, I invite you to imagine that that thing is inside lava in a volcano, and raise your arms straight up over your head as if you're pushing that thing just out of the top of a volcano. And as you exhale, you can sigh out and just like allow your arms to go out the side of the volcano and down, kind of tracing that as if you're building a volcano or a pyramid around you. And then do that 3 more times, inhaling, kind of bringing in and gathering all of the stress, exhale, inhaling a little bit more, pushing it up, and exhaling it just out. So do that 2 more times on your own, thinking of what it is you don't want to have to worry about right now, and just pushing it out of the volcano, as if you are creating a little calm volcano to do yoga in tonight. And once you feel like you've kind of pushed away everything that you don't want to have to be dealing with right now, think about things that you want more of. Like think about if you're feeling stressed, maybe you want more calm. If you're feeling like there's a lot of unease, maybe you want to feel a little bit more ease. And we're going to do that motion in reverse. So we'll put our arms out to our sides, kind of laying our fingertips on the ground, and imagining that we're pulling that in as we inhale our arms up over our head, and put our hands together and bring that down into our heart, into our chest. And so do that 3 more times on your own. Just inhaling, thinking about what you want more of, gathering it up, and just bringing it into your space. And the theme of tonight's class is called Riding the Wave, and we'll see more about why that's kind of the theme. But as you're bringing more into yourself, just imagine that you are just bringing in everything that you need to have more of what it is that you want. You're just gathering everything up from all around you, in your space, in your world, and just bringing that in. And so we're going to stretch out our spine a little bit more. And we've been stretching kind of upwards and outwards. And now we're just going to do a brief seated twist before we move into some of our first poses. And so kind of gathering back into your seat, bring your arms directly out to your sides and inhale as wide as you possibly can. And as you exhale, pick which side you're going to twist to first. And inhale and exhale, twisting over. I'm going to twist to the right and put my left hand on my right knee and my right hand behind me. And just take 2 breaths, inhaling and exhaling, feeling as I inhale my breath go all the way down the back of my spine. And exhaling, just settling in, noticing my entire spine, my back, and just noticing what it feels like. And on your next inhale, just bring your arms back out to the side, straight out, and just see if you can stretch your fingertips incredibly wide, as if you were reaching to the sides of the walls opposite you. And as you exhale, just twist to the opposite side. So for me, I'm now twisting to the left. Put my right hand on my left knee. And just noticing my entire spine, what it feels like to be twisted. And noticing if it feels differently twisting to this side than the other side. One thing that you might notice tonight is that different sides of your body feel different. A common thing that we often think is that if you can stretch one way on one side, you'll be able to do that on the other side. And I want to encourage you tonight to just treat each side of your body as its own separate entity. So on your next inhale, come back to the center. And again, stretch yourself out as wide as you can, imagining that you're kind of a star, stretching all the way out to each side. And exhale your hands just back to your knees. And we might also have a special guest tonight. This is Tails. He likes to join my yoga classes. So if you have pets, you might notice that they might join you as well. This is mine, just introducing everyone to our guest secondary teacher. So the next pose that we're gonna do is gonna be our first pose, and it's gonna be called toe squat. And this can be a pose, if you've done it before, that might be your least favorite pose. But I encourage you to think about it a little bit differently tonight, and I'll guide us through some ways that we can focus on noticing the purpose and the goal of Yin Yoga through this pose. So what we're gonna do is, if you are on your mat and you have something to place under your knees because you have sensitive knees, go ahead and do that. And just come up onto your knees and tuck your toes underneath your heels. So kind of if you do yoga often, in downward dog, we have our toes kind of underneath ourselves. And what we're gonna do for this pose is we're gonna sit back onto our heels. Note, making sure that all of our toes are tucked underneath us. And if this pose feels incredibly uncomfortable for you and you don't think that you'll be able to be here, a few modifications that you might want to try are placing maybe a rolled up blanket or a towel on top of your heels, and then seeing if you can set back on that, and so you're not sitting back as far. Or if this pose still feels incredibly uncomfortable for you, go ahead and just untuck your toes and just sit back on your heels. And while you have your feet tucked underneath you, if this is what you're doing, your hands can be anywhere that feels comfortable for you. If you don't want to lean all the way back and want to keep your hands on the ground, you can do that. If you want to place your hands on your thighs, go ahead and do that. Or if you enjoyed kind of having your arms out to the side and feeling that stretch across your chest, go ahead and do that. But find yourself a position that you can be in for about 3 minutes. And what we're going to do is just focus on noticing what it feels like to inhale all the way down to our feet. Imagining that we can breathe our breath all the way down our spine, down our legs, down our shins, and into our feet. And while you're in this pose, I want you to think about, what do you feel in your body? What does sensation feel like in this pose? This is probably an incredibly uncomfortable position if you've never tried this before. And I want you to consider the difference between discomfort and pain, and notice that. If you are feeling pain at all, please change what you're doing and do something that doesn't feel like pain. Yin Yoga is about riding the wave of discomfort and getting yourself to about a 6 out of 10, or maybe a 5 out of 10, but never all the way up to a 10. We aren't here to push ourselves to our limits. We aren't here to stretch ourselves beyond what our body's capable of. We're just here to notice what it feels like to feel sensation and sit with that, so that when we're off of our mats in our daily lives and things are uncomfortable, we've practiced what it feels like to sit with that, ride the wave, and begin to be a little bit more comfortable with being uncomfortable. So if you haven't gotten yourself into a place where you feel like you can be, go ahead and change anything that you need to change, and then just settle in. And again, focus on your breath, breathing all the way down into your feet, and then exhaling everything out. And if you've been having any neck tension in the last few days, months, or time, you might want to try tilting your head over to one side for a couple breaths, and then tilting your head to the other side. If you've never done toe squat before, doing a secondary pose by twisting our head to one side can really help us ride that edge and just really feel into what it feels like to notice two parts of our body at once. And one of the things that I, again, love about Yin Yoga is just the ability to explore new sensations and explore what it feels like to sit with those. And so take 2 more deep breaths in this pose. And then after your second deep breath, I want you to place your hands on the mat in front of you and lean forward and slowly move out of this pose. In Yin Yoga, getting out of the pose is just as important as being in the pose, because as I mentioned, we're stretching our body in ways we don't often stretch. And so as you get out of the pose, go ahead and just sit back on your heels. And if you were already doing that, just stay in that pose. And our next pose that we're going to move into is called saddle pose. And this pose will kind of do something a little bit opposite from what we were doing. But before we do that, I want us to stretch out the front of our feet. And so what I want you to do is place your hands behind you. You don't have to have them flat. And then lift up your knees a little bit so that you feel that stretch across your shins and across the tops of your feet. Kind of stretching the other side of our feet and just noticing our entire foot. And then come back down, just sit it on our knees. And for saddle pose, I'm going to give us a couple different options. And the first one is going to be the full expression of the pose. And one of the most important things I want to remind us about Yin Yoga is that any version of the pose is the pose. And so this is about your body and just taking time and noticing yourself. And so the full expression of saddle pose, we'll kind of shift our knees a little bit to the side so that we can sit between our heels. And if you have a bolster or anything, go ahead and place that lengthwise behind you. And then place each of your hands on each side of that bolster and begin to guide yourself backwards. And if you start to feel any sort of pain in your knee, go ahead and come back up, and I'll give us an alternative to this pose. But go ahead and start to lie yourself back on whatever is sitting behind you. You might move yourself down to your forearms, or you might be able to lie all the way back. Either option works well. And you'll notice this stretch across the front of your thighs and across the front of your legs. And if you need an alternative, what you can do is kind of do one leg at a time. So leave one leg underneath you, stretch the other leg out in front of you, and try lying back in that way. And if neither of those things work well for you, I want you to just lie back on your mat and just take a few moments in Shavasana, noticing the length of your entire body. And so I'll let us know when we're about halfway through this, so that if you're doing one leg, you'll be able to try the alternate leg and switch that up. So easing your way into saddle pose, guiding yourself back. And if you need to prop up the pose, the prop that you're laying back on, go ahead and do that with anything that works well for you. If you've taken a restorative class before, you know that once you're guided into the poses, the expectation is that you'll just be able to release and just rest fully. And Yin Yoga is pretty similar. However, it's also a lot of work in some of our poses. And we're focusing on releasing the deep tensions that are in our fascia system and deep into our muscles, in the interest of releasing things, maybe emotionally, that are kind of trapped deep within us because we needed them to be where they had to be for that time. And a quote that I want us to think on throughout tonight's practice is a quote from Brene Brown, one of my favorite authors. And she says that only when we're brave enough to explore the darkness will we discover the infinite power of our light. And I think for me, Yin is really that space between things. It's that pause between moments. And it's that moment of darkness in some ways, where we're just waiting and being and releasing. And so if you had one leg forward and one leg back, take 2 more deep breaths, and then guide yourself slowly back up, moving to your forearms and then to your hands, and switch out which leg is straight and which leg is bent. And just rest here, breathing down the entire front side of your body as you inhale all the way down to your knees, and then exhaling all the way back out, and just allowing yourself to rest and release. wherever you are, take 2 more deep breaths, and then guide yourself back up as slowly as you guided yourself down. So moving up to your forearms, and then up to your palms, and then just up to where you're seated between your heels, or seated with one leg out in front of you and one behind you. And as you're doing this, as you're kind of here in this rebound moment, just notice what feels different on each side. And our next pose that we'll move into, before we do that, we'll bring both of our legs out in front of us. So unbending our knees, just straightening our legs out, and just kind of bouncing our legs up and down to just release any blood flow that was trapped in our knees when they're bent, and just feel our entire legs. You might want to tap the tops of your legs, tap all the way down your shins to your feet, and just feel the length of your entire legs. And our next pose that we're going to do is a butterfly forward fold. And so what we'll do is bend our knees again, but not underneath us, and kind of create a diamond shape between our body and our feet, with the soles of our feet together in front of us and our legs kind of as butterfly wings. And you don't need to bring your heels all the way in a traditional butterfly pose unless you want to. This is more about folding and focusing on feeling the length of our body, but situate your feet in front of you in a way that allows you to feel as if your knees are not uncomfortable, but your feet are together. And just hold on to your ankles with your hands and just stretch the entire length of your spine for a big, quick inhale. So inhaling, looking up towards the sky, and as you exhale, begin to fold yourself forward over your feet. And as you do this, you might want to push your feet a little bit farther out from your body, or bring them in a little bit closer, because you might begin to notice sensation in your hips, or your knees, or your back. And if you'd like to put a prop in front of you, go ahead and do that so that you can just relax all the way down. But the focus here is just on noticing what this feels like in your hips and in your back. If you don't have a prop underneath you, you might not notice it as much in your back, but if you do, you might be able to put your arms straight out in front of you and just relax over that, kind of having a hunch stretched out back, and begin to breathe all the way down the back. And also notice what your breath feels like when you breathe into your hips. Alternatively, if you'd like to put a block kind of in front of your feet and not totally stretch out your back, but just kind of lean and fold over, that might feel enjoyable as well. So get yourself into a position you can sit in for about 3 to 4 minutes. And as we're folding forward and just bowing forward, I want you to think about this year. There's 35 days left in 2020. 35 days ago was the week before Halloween. And so in some ways that time could feel like an eternity ago, but in some ways it feels incredibly close. And as you think about the next 35 days left in this year before we start 2021, just think about your relationship to time and the way in which it can sometimes feel as if it's a tidal wave coming in quickly, taking over our to-do lists and our expectations. And other times it can feel as though it's moving incredibly slow. And so in these moments, just use this time to focus on you and rest and release. And just remember that this is the beginning of something, and this moment is your moment to take from it what you need and give to it what you don't need to hold on to. So just on your next exhale, see if you can release a little bit farther and see if you can notice any new sensations. And we'll spend about another minute here in this pose. And And so if you'd like to change where your arms are, go ahead and do that. If you want to try stretching out your back to feel what that feels like, go ahead and do that. And then just release into this butterfly forward fold. If you've been holding your jaw, just open your mouth a little bit, move it side to side, and just allow it to release and just rest. And on your next inhale, go ahead and place your hands on the ground in front of you and slowly start to inch them back towards you, inching yourself back up to an upright spine, slowly being mindful of noticing what moving in the opposite direction feels like. And when you find yourself back seated straight with an upright spine, just flutter your knees a little bit, bouncing them up and down like butterfly wings, to just release anything that was stuck in your hips as you folded forward, down your legs, and out your feet. And next we're going to move on to hands and knees. So if you have any props on your mat other than a blanket, go ahead and shift those off. We won't need them for the next little bit of time. Although you might want a block to rest your head on. So if you have any blocks, go ahead and move that up to the top of your mat. And our next pose is going to be thread the needle. But before we do that, I want us to do a couple rounds of cat-cow to just feel what it feels like to move the energy and the breath up our spine from our lower body up through our body to our shoulders. So go ahead and find yourself on hands and knees with your knees below your hips and your hands below your shoulders. And as you inhale, just drop your stomach and raise your hips and look up towards the sky, moving your back in such a way. And as you exhale, moving into a cat position, dropping your head, and inhaling, looking back up towards the sky, tilting your hips, and exhaling, dropping your head downward, letting your neck relax. And do that 2 more times on your own, 3 if you need it, and just feel the wave of your spine as it moves in these opposite directions. If you want to do any other movements, such as look over one shoulder and look over the other shoulder, or exaggerate your movements in any way to feel into your spine, please do that. And for thread the needle, what we're going to do is just find yourself really planted with your hands and knees. And I'm going to start with my right hand. And so what we're going to do is inhale and peel open your right arm, pointing it up towards the ceiling, opening your chest to the side. And as you exhale, we're going to sweep it underneath our left arm and place our right shoulder on the ground. And as you do this, leave your left arm where it is for just a moment and get yourself into a position where you can really feel the back of your body stretching and then also the side body stretching. And then you might want to move your left arm up kind of off the top of your mat, or you might want to wrap it around your body so that it grabs your opposite hip, or you might want to leave it just where it is. But our right arm is through underneath our left arm with our palm up towards the ceiling. And if you feel like you aren't able to rest here, you might want to put a block underneath your head and rest the side of your head on that block, or if you'd like to be looking straight down, you can rest your forehead on that. But go ahead and get yourself into a position where your right arm is underneath, your left arm is outstretched, and you're noticing what it feels like to stretch out while also compressing at the same time. Noticing 2 opposite sensations happening. So as you breathe, how can you still breathe deeply while also noticing the constriction? 2020 has definitely been a year of changing in great ways while dealing with incredibly challenging things at the same time for many of us, hour by hour. So just focus on your breath and take a moment and just say thank you to your body for its ability to breathe through very strange, very uncomfortable moments. And take 2 more deep breaths on this side. And on your second deep breath, we'll just unwind ourselves the same way that we came in. On an exhale. And so as you exhale, just unthread the right arm up, pointing it back up towards the ceiling. And then place it back down underneath your shoulder. Just move for about 30 seconds in any way that your body wants to move. You might want to do some hip circles where you send your hips back towards your heels and draw a circle. You might want to do some cat-cows. Just move in any way your body wants to for a couple breaths. And after you found yourself feeling re-centered, notice for a second what feels different about your right shoulder than your left shoulder. Nothing to do with this information, just notice it. And on your next inhale, lift your left arm up towards the ceiling, noticing if this feels any different than your right arm. And as you exhale, threading it underneath your right arm, with your palm up on the ground, and settling the left side of your head onto a prop or the ground, and moving your right arm wherever you need it, whether that be over your head, behind your back, or just leaving it planted where it was. And notice your breath on this side, if it feels any easier or more challenging to breathe. A theme of 2020 for me has been just noticing the breathtaking moments, the good ones and the bad ones, and just accepting them, riding the wave of what they are, and learning to know what I need to make it through to the next moment, how to ask for that, and then how to accept support in a very different way than ever before. The one thing about 2020 that might bring you comfort is that our breath has been there with us through every single one of these moments that we've been experiencing. And it's been there through every single moment we've experienced since the day we were born, and will be with us through every single moment of our life. And so while we often are more physically separated than any year before in our life, our breath has been there through us with every moment. Many of us may have had pets or partners or other loved ones with us through many of these moments. But other times we're in these moments in ways that feel very alone and very isolating. And so in those moments, I encourage you to just come to your breath, breathe in as deep as you can, notice what that feels like, and spend a few moments just hanging out, focusing on your breath, and remembering that you're here, and you'll be there, and it will be there with you. And if at any time tonight you start to notice that you're feeling sensations that stir up emotions, I encourage you to just sit with those. For me, the journaling practice after Yin Yoga often allows me to just get all of that emotional stirring out and just begin to process it then. For now, just focus on being with your breath and your body and let what is be, because it'll be there afterwards. So take 2 more deep breaths here on this side, and after your second deep breath, plant your right hand again back by your face. Inhale and lift your left arm back up towards the ceiling, and plant it back down after your second deep breath. And once you found your way back to this tabletop position with our knees below our hips and our hands below our shoulders, again, move in any way your body wants to move, just rebounding for a moment, noticing anything that's more similar or more different on each side of your body. Maybe you want to arch your spine a little bit and feel into that. And the next pose we're going to move into is called Child's Pose. And for many of us, this can be a restful pose, but in Yin, it can often feel like a lot of work with emotions. And so for Child's Pose, you can do a knees together or knees separated pose. If you'd like to keep your feet together, your knees together, go ahead and do that and just settle your hips back onto your feet. This time not sitting, but stretching your arms out in front of you and resting your forehead on the ground. If you'd like a different position, you can spread your knees about as wide as your mat, placing your big toes together, and settle back so that your torso goes between your knees and maybe more of your body rests on the ground. And what I encourage you to do is, in these first few breaths, just see how much you can stretch out your back by pushing your arms or placing your arms out in front of you and kind of gripping the mat for a moment so that you can feel the entire length of your side body on each side simultaneously. And do that for a couple breaths, and then just find yourself resting. And if you'd like a more restorative child's pose tonight, or this is causing some uncomfortable sensation in your back, you can place something in front of you and rest your torso and your chest on that. But go ahead and find a position that you can be in for about 5 minutes for child's pose. And just really relax into this pose. And this might feel like more of a restorative pose for your body. But child's pose can be an incredibly challenging pose emotionally for some. It can stir up a lot of emotions, can make us feel both vulnerable and protected simultaneously, and can just really allow us a space to just be with ourselves as we're face down on the ground with our breath and our mind and our body. Just notice where you feel things in your body and just be there, supported by the ground, supported by anything underneath you, and just rest and release. And if at any point emotions come up and you notice that your body wants to cry, I encourage you to simply try and allow yourself to ride the wave of that and cry if you want to. Oftentimes in Yin, things are releasing, and tears are a way of liquid emotion releasing itself from our body so that we can move into a new phase and a new chapter. And we're about halfway through, so if you tried knees together and you'd like to try knees apart, or vice versa, go ahead and make any changes you like, and then just resettle in to the pose of child's pose, allowing yourself to just fully relax and be held and supported by yourself, your breath, and your body. And take 2 more deep breaths. And on your second deep breath on the exhale, similar to how we did in butterfly forward fold, just begin to press your hands into the ground and crawl yourself back up to where you're seated on your heels. Noticing what it feels like to unwind and move our spine back upright. And go ahead and shift into a pose that allows your hips to feel like they are releasing a little bit and you're able to come back. Maybe you want to move into a cat-cow. Maybe you want to do some hip circles. The next pose that we'll move into is another forward facing pose, and it's called pigeon pose, or sometimes in Yin it's called sleeping swan pose. So find yourself back on your hands and knees in a tabletop position. And we're gonna start with our right leg. And so go ahead and lift up your right leg and push it behind you, kind of straightening out your leg, bouncing your heel a little bit, just stretching into the entire length of your leg. And then on your next inhale, lift it up and move your right knee towards your right wrist and begin to sit it down and move your right ankle over towards your left wrist. And then what we're gonna do next is move our left foot back in space so that we can stretch out our left leg. And if you haven't done pigeon pose before, or it's been a while, you might want or just need some props. And so if you have anything soft, you might want to put that underneath your right hip, kind of cushioning it so that it's not necessarily floating in space. You might want to keep your left toe tucked underneath because your knee feels a little bit something tonight. Or you might want to bend your left foot in a little bit more towards your body. So go ahead and find what you need to prop underneath your right hip so it's not necessarily floating, leaving your hands kind of on the ground, planted. And on your next inhale, just kind of stretch your spine up towards the sky, noticing what a breath feels like all the way down from your nostrils, all the way down to your core, into your hips. And then as you exhale, begin to walk your hands forward so that you can relax and release over that right leg. Maybe you move onto forearms on the mat in front of you, Maybe you want to put a prop in front of you and relax onto that like you did in child's pose. But just find a place that you can release into this position, but also still feel some sensation in that right hip. You might also notice sensation in the front of your left hip, because we're stretching out that part of our body as well. But nothing, again, should feel like pain. We are noticing discomfort, but we aren't wanting to push our bodies into a place of pain. And if tonight you notice that you're pushing your body into a place of discomfort, maybe back off a little bit and wonder a little bit about your desire to push yourself into a place of discomfort rather than simply be with discomfort. Pigeon pose is another pose in Yin that can often stir up some emotions or sensations just because it's getting into parts of our body and stretching them that we don't normally do during our everyday. And so there's a song with a lyric about hips don't lie, and I think for me, pigeon pose has been the pose that confirmed that that lyric is true on a different level, in that if I have emotional things going on in my life or hard things that I'm pushing aside to deal with later and I get into a pigeon pose, they often come back. And so just ride the wave of whatever it is that you feel emotionally and physically here, and just allow it to release and just be. And you can work on anything that you need to work on with it later. You can think more about it later. Just let it float off into the ocean and just be here with your breath and your body. Inhaling the goal of releasing, and exhaling, seeing if you can release your body into relaxing a little bit more. And if you're having a hard time with this pose, go ahead and change anything that you'd like to change, and try noticing what it feels like to trace your breath in your mind's eye up and down the back of your spine. Similar to what we did in toes pose, noticing our breath in a different part of our body can sometimes allow the other part of our body to release a little bit more, just shifting that focus. And take 2 more breaths. And again, like before, on your second exhale, begin to plant your hands and inch yourself back up to that position where your head is more pointed towards your ceiling. And just stretch out, noticing the front side of your body again. And there's multiple ways for us to shift over to the second side once we're kind of ready for that. And so one way that you can do is just kind of shift over and lean onto that right hip and just bring your legs around, kind of back to a butterfly position at first. And then just shift onto hands and knees again, if you'd like to do that. And move in any way, kind of releasing your hips, noticing different sides. And then once you've done whatever feels good for your body to rebound between sides, notice differences, accept the differences, go ahead and stretch your left foot back like we did with our right, noticing the length of our leg, kind of bouncing a little bit to feel into that length. And then lifting up our left knee, moving into our left wrist, bring our left ankle close to our right wrist, and then inching our right leg back, maybe keeping our foot tucked, maybe laying it flat, and just propping up our hip with anything that we need so that it's not floating in space. Maybe we put a block under it, maybe a blanket. And again, our 2 sides of our body might look the same, but internally they are not the same. And they might feel different than you expected or different than your last yoga class. And I encourage you to just be with the body that you are in right here in this time on this side. And just inhale, stretching your head up towards the ceiling, noticing the entire length of your spine. And as you exhale, moving your hands out in front of you and starting to relax over that left knee on the second side of pigeon pose. And if when you were in child's pose you kind of liked that tension underneath your forehead of the ground, you might want to put a block underneath your forehead during pigeon pose and just rest your head on that block so that your neck can release in a different way than if it's all the way on the ground or isn't able to reach the ground tonight. Sometimes having pressure on the center of our forehead, kind of our third eye area, can allow us a different type of release, can ease the anxiety we're feeling, and just re-ground us in a way that many other poses can't. Just release into this side. Notice your breath. Notice if you'd like to shift, focusing on your breath to somewhere else other than your hips. And just be here with yourself. And take 2 more deep breaths. And on the second exhale, we'll move back upright. Inching our hands back closer to our body. Inhaling and stretching out the front of our body while staying in this position. And then we're just going to move on to our bellies for a quick re-round position. So go ahead and pick up that left knee, move it back towards the tabletop position, shift for just a few breaths, making any movements that you need to with your hips to release them. And then just stretch your body out so that you're face down on the mat with your forearms still somewhat planted similarly. And we're going to do a brief Sphinx pose to allow the rest of our spine to just release if we weren't able to release all the way in pigeon pose. So with our feet stretched out behind us and our forearms planted on the ground with our elbows underneath our shoulders, notice if you can bend your elbows and grab the opposite elbow with the opposite hand. And then release your arms back out in front of you, planting your hands. And just take an inhale, kind of stretching out that heart space, similar to our cat-cow with our spine. And as you exhale, if you're looking for more of a release, go ahead and just allow your heart space to just melt between your shoulders and maybe your neck to drop, your chin towards your chest. And just take 3 breaths here in this Sphinx pose. Noticing what it feels like to notice your breath in your upper back, between your shoulder blades. And notice if you can feel as though your upper back is kind of in a hammock between your shoulder blades, just resting. Your heart is just being held by your shoulders, and you're just releasing anything out the top of your head that you don't want to be thinking about and you don't want to be focusing on, and just feeling held by your breath. And take one more breath here. And on your next exhale, we'll just release our arms from underneath ourselves, lay all the way down on our belly for just a moment, planting our head on the ground, taking a deep breath, and then roll over onto your back. So kind of the opposite position of laying face down. Just roll over and lie face up with your feet outstretched, your arms by your side for just a moment. And wiggle in any way that your body wants to wiggle right now so that you can feel yourself lying comfortably on your back. Maybe that's shifting your hips side to side, windshield wipering your feet, moving your shoulders in any way that's now that the part of our body that was being held is flat on the ground. And we're just going to go into what I call lightsaber pose and then banana-nasana pose. So lightsaber pose is basically just making yourself a beam of light from your feet up to your hands. So go ahead and outstretch your arms above your head, stretching them as far as you can towards whatever is that direction, and stretching your feet as far as you can, whatever is that direction, and making yourself kind of a beam of light, stretching in all the directions at the same time, imagining that your breath can cultivate whatever you want it to do, and you are a lightsaber to take on whatever you need to take on. And inhale and stretch as far as you can, and exhale, just sigh and release onto your mat. In banana-nasana pose, we'll stretch our entire side bodies from our toes up to our fingertips. And so we're going to start by picking up our left foot and moving it to the left side of our mat, and then moving our right foot next to that, so that it's kind of on the edge of our mat, and the rest of our body stays the same. And then next we're going to move our left hand to the left side of the top of our mat, and our right hand next to it. And you should begin to notice a stretch down the entire right side of your body, all the way up and down the sides of your ribs, and your hips, and your legs. And if you'd like more or a different sensation, pick up one of your feet, it doesn't matter which one, and place that ankle over the other one, and grab one wrist with the other wrist. Doesn't matter which one you grab with which, because you'll have a chance halfway through to switch that. But just notice which feels more like riding that edge of a wave, moving into that 6 out of 10 of the comfortable to discomfort scale, and just see if you can kind of stretch your entire right side of your body out, releasing anything that's been crunched up and allowing yourself to just be open. Many of us spend a lot of our time, and have needed to spend a lot of our time, being protective, being closed off, and just sitting in this place of waiting to see what's next. But here right now, just allow yourself to be open, and release, and relax. And now tell us when we're about halfway through if you'd like to switch which foot is on top on this side. And we're about halfway through this side, so if you'd like to switch which hand is holding which wrist or which foot is on top, go ahead and do that. If you like where you are, just stay there. Inhaling, feeling if you can feel your entire body, and exhaling, seeing if you can release into this outstretched, open, vulnerable place. It can be hard to be vulnerable, and we also have a lot that we have to hold. Right now, just release. And on your next exhale, if you have your hands grasping your wrists, let go. If you have your feet crossed, let go. And just begin to slowly move your right foot back towards the center, and then your left foot, and then your right arm back straight above you, and your left arm. And if you'd like to try that lightsaber stretching again, go ahead and do that. If you want to just sit here and windshield wiper your legs, do that. And then we'll move over to our second side. So we'll lift up our right foot, move it to the right side of our mat, our left foot next to it, move our right arm over to the right side, and our left arm next to it, crossing or grabbing whichever ankle or wrist you would like with the opposite one. And just see if you can imagine yourself as a banana. The outside of your body is the peel, holding everything together. Being incredibly strong, holding everything, but also stretching and protecting everything. But just also notice as you breathe the inside that is protected, that is held, and that is kept for the right time. So breathing into the left side of your body, up and down, noticing what it feels like to be stretched and open.